Have you ever come across an English sentence or phrase that you translated every word? You know what each word means, but altogether, it just doesn't make sense.
So you knew the words, but you didn't know the meaning. We've been there. We've run across this as well. So let's talk about it.
What's up, guys? Welcome to Waggle Friends English. We have been off YouTube for a little bit, for a few days, but we are back strong. So let's get into this problem because this is very frustrating.
So if you have looked up a word in the dictionary recently, you can learn what the word means. You can see the word used in a proper context, and you can even scan for synonyms, but there are some things that dictionaries and translation apps just don't do very well. They can't actually teach you. For example, they can't tell you how frequently this word is used. They can't tell you exactly what context it's going to be used in. Not just a sentence, but like the context, the range of meaning that you would use it in professional business context, for example.
Yeah.
And it can't tell you which synonym for that word would be better, what sounds better or fits better in this context versus the other context. There's just too much information. Try to put that on a flashcard, and that flashcard's going to get really big really fast.
So sometimes the difference between these, and the reason the dictionary can't capture this, is because it depends on the perspective of the speaker. Recently, I had a student ask me, she was writing the instructions for a toddler cup with a silicone straw, and it's supposed to be leak proof. So there's a very tight spot for that straw to fit into. And she was writing the instructions for this in English. And she said, should I say slide the straw into the cup, or should I say insert the straw into the cup? Now, this was very interesting because this opened up a can of worms. You could say something like putting the straw into the cup, but this is very generic. It would work in a context where it's pretty obvious what's going to happen here, but it is generic. To say put the straw into the cup, it could also mean put the whole straw into the cup and put the lid on top of that. It could mean putting it into a whole design for the cup. It could be that the cup has no lid and you're just putting a straw in it before you give it to somebody. You could also say slide the straw into the cup. And here you would say into the hole made for the cup or something like this, because slide indicates that there's not much of a gap between the cup and the straw once it's in place. There's a lot of contact for it to get in there. Now, this would be appropriate because of a leak-proof cup, but it's also very informal. Insert the straw into the cup sounds like an instruction manual, really. Insert is one of those words that just sounds very manual-like. Another option would be sticking the straw into the cup. Just stick something in there. We use that really informally. It's extremely informal, actually. We could just stick a sticker to a page. You could stick something to a window. You could stick something to the cup. So that could refer to stickiness or adhesive of some kind. But you can also use it to put flowers into a vase, stick some flowers into that vase, or you could stick a straw into that cup, or you could stick this, but it's very informal to say this. So to provide step-by-step instructions for your product, probably not a good option there. So it was an interesting conversation, but I hope you guys can see from this how different those synonyms are. They are synonyms, they do overlap in meaning, but we use them a little bit differently depending on the context.
This is the nuance that AI and translation apps and all the functions can't actually pin down. Like they can't pin down the difference between sticking it in the cup versus inserting it into the cup. And the meaning is largely dependent on us as humans.
It depends on what it sounds like to us. It depends on what we feel when we say that word. This is nuance, right? This is nuance of words, and it is very tricky. So if you are high advanced, you really need to be paying attention to this.
We had a student who was repeatedly coming into contact with different synonyms while reading this book for the way that light does stuff. Light interacts, whether it's moonlight or sunlight or light bouncing off of a surface or light gleaming or shimmering off of something or bouncing off the eyes, light in the eyes. And he started to look this up in the dictionary, and he kept on finding that the synonyms were used to define each other. He was really struggling to figure out what these words actually mean. Words such as sparkle, glitter, glint, glisten, twinkle, flicker, shimmer, shine, gleam, dance, blink, wink, glow. There's a lot of words that we use for light, and for good reason, but when you are trying to understand that, while you're just trying to read through this book, you go to the dictionary and it's pointing you in circles. What's going on?
Because we brought this up, let's just say it really quickly. For you to understand why there's so many words for this, it's because sometimes we're associating the word and the way that it sounds to reflect what the light is doing. So for example, for light off of water or little bits of things, we would say that it's sparkle, shimmer, glimmer, twinkle, flicker. They all sound like the light is reflecting off of little things, whether it's water that's kind of choppy in the moonlight or whether it's lots of little things that are reflective, like glitter, the noun. You also have things like flash, blink, wink, and glint, which are all like just quick flashes of light, just very quick. So whether it's a headlight going through the trees and it's flashing, or whether somebody has a flashlight and they're turning it on and off, okay, that's light that's flashing. For dance, it's kind of like the light is moving rhythmically a little bit. It's just moving, and kind of water does this too, where if it's got good motion, you've got light that dances on the waves, light that dances on the river. Gleam is more like a beam of light in a way. Basically, it means that the light is reflecting off of water or glass or metal or something. It's gleaming off, and it's doing so very brightly. Okay, so we can actually use this for a gleam in an eye, for meaning the emotions in a person's eyes are very strong, so they can get a gleam of something. And then shine and glow. These words you should already know, as that is the light source, like the light source. The sun shines, fire glows, or a nightlight glows at night. So these we can actually also use for something inside a person that comes out. So whether it's their cleverness or their joy, their happiness, those things can shine or glow about a person. These words, all of them are actually very common, and it's used in different contexts. It can be used reflections of light, but it could also be the light source, describing how it gives off light, but it could also be emotions and how you give off those emotions or how they appear in your eyes. This is very confusing, especially if the dictionary is sending you in circles.
That was a lot, and it is purposefully a lot because the dictionary can't fully grasp the depth of meaning that words can have for us. So the question is that if you have 10, 12 words that seem synonymous, what do? Go to a thesaurus, open it up, and ask yourself the question, what do I do? What can I do with all these words? Well, we have some things that you can do even today in order to help gain some clarity when you have this struggle of all these different words that maybe the dictionary isn't always so helpful with.
First, you've got to take note. When you start seeing the same word popping up quite often, or you keep hearing it in conversation, in news, in things that you're reading, ideally you're doing English every day, right? Doing it every day. You need to be paying attention to this. You need to be looking at those words. And if they keep showing up and you know what it means in context, you don't have to define the word to understand what you're listening to or reading, that's great. But if you keep seeing that word, you should probably figure out what it's related to, what are its synonyms, and what does it mean. Okay, so write that down and start taking note of the context that you see it in.
Second, you just have to need to know. You cannot just be okay with learning, hey, this means this. I'm done. Moving on. I know that flashcard now. You cannot be okay with that. You have to dive deep into the words, because if you allow things to just be, like, yeah, I sort of know these words, then you're never going to get into the depth of the language to be able to communicate well in the proper context and have that impact that communication seeks to convey.
You just won't remember a word you'll never use. That's why I would start looking up those words that you don't actually know what they mean, but you see them often. Third, ask an English speaker about these words. If you see it and the dictionary doesn't help you really, the thesaurus doesn't really help you that much, or it does, but you're not sure about context or how often, ask an English speaker. Just ask a friend, send an email, find a tutor or a teacher who is willing to work with you through it. Whatever it is, look for that, because a person who will sit down and talk to you about the difference between words, that is an invaluable resource, especially in the advanced levels and actually beyond the point of fluency. When you are already fluent, this is something that you will still struggle with a bit, is understanding the depth of words or how to express yourself very deeply. If you are one of those people that just really enjoy those conversations, find a friend who enjoys sharing them with you.
One of our students, they are asking us, why did people look at me weird when I said that word? By a dictionary translation, that's an okay thing to say. And it's because they don't understand the connotation, the context that is determined around that word. Maybe they say a word that's just very inappropriate in that context. And so people look at them strange. They might get a write-off because they're a foreigner or something. But the reality is, if you really want to seek to communicate naturally, fluently, then you need to be able to understand the context and just the web of meaning that words have.
Another thing you could do with these words is you could try asking Google or AI, Bing, whatever it is that you use. You can. And they're good at giving some answers, but they can't give you the fine nuances. They can't give you, well, do people actually say that or don't they? Or which region do they normally say that in? For that, you're going to need somebody who knows what they're talking about to share that with you. Otherwise, as you continue your reading and listening in English, just take note of every time that word shows up, and especially if it's in a different context. Make sure that you're taking in a wide variety of contexts. YouTube is great for this. You can be watching science videos as well as history videos, as well as something about fashion and design or something about pop culture. You can learn all kinds of stuff on YouTube. Lots of different contexts are at your fingertips. And anytime a word that you are particularly focused on that week shows up, pay attention to it.
So guys, language is complex because people are complex. We do not like to make things easy, and that is naturally how we are as people. But when you finally nail down what a word means, when you fully grasp what the depth of meaning that these words that you are studying have, then you'll be able to communicate extremely well, and you'll be able to understand the nuances that are being brought up. You're going to be able to understand why something sounds good. Not just that it does sound good, but why it sounds good, and more importantly, to be able to use that same skill to develop your own speaking habits, for you to be able to have that impact that you just heard, for you to be able to have that communication skill that you are listening for you to be able to have that means that you got to dig deep into these words.
Right. But do you have to? No. No, you don't. If your goals for learning English are just to communicate and live here, you can get by with far less than this level. But if you are an advanced speaker and you are seeking to become more efficient and effective in your communication with coworkers at work, maybe you're leading trainings, or maybe you live here, you have kids who are born and raised here, and you just want them to be able to communicate, and you want to be able to understand what they understand in this culture, then being able to dive in like this is important. And it's something that could be a priority. And it doesn't have to be a lot of words. Don't focus on 10 words in the same day, chasing down their context and meaning across different contexts. No. This is a one word at a time strategy, because one word down, one word that you really pay attention to and look for and pay attention to context in a week, that's great. I know that's only 52 words in a year, but that's okay. The thing is you're going to be building out a very robust web of understanding of different words, because you're just focusing on one particular word, but you're tying it in with all these other synonyms, some that you know, some that you don't. And those synonyms will start running into each other and creating this web, this vast web of vocabulary, which is going to be very useful. And you will find that even focusing on one word at a time, you're going to be getting a lot more out of it than you would have ever expected.
At any rate, learning advanced vocabulary, going deep with it, is extremely rewarding. You get to see the weight that words carry. You get to be able to communicate more effectively, and that is incredibly rewarding. And you are likely to be able to use it in various contexts down the road. If you guys would like to see more videos of confusing vocabulary in various contexts, let us know in the comments below. Or you can also join our email list where we do a free deep word study every month.
All right, guys, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.